Welcome back to the Vanessa G Fitcast. I'm Vanessa Pozos, and here with me is Omar Pozos, my co-host, husband, and all things to me.
What's up, babe? How are you?
I'm doing well, and I wanted to do this episode because recently I found myself in this pattern of just like eating at night without feeling like intentional or in control, I guess I could say.
Yeah.
I shared about this a little bit on Instagram, but I think it started a little bit with having a little bit of hormonal changes, as many of you know, if you've been listening for a while or been following me on Instagram, I've overcome and continued to dealt with a lot of shifts and changes in my hormone health and a lot of different things within my body. And anytime you're going through a hormone healing journey, it's really not something where it's like you cross a finish line and you're just good for the rest of your life.
Woohoo, I made it.
Yeah, you really do have to continuously manage things continuously to make sure that you don't kind of go backwards. And it is an ebb and flow. It's not just like a straight trajectory forward. And, with like recently we had 1 month that was a little bit more stressful. And guess what? Having a very stressful month, I found that the following month I could feel the difference in my hormones. And, I've talked a little bit about dealing with some PMDD, dealing with essentially like a lot of depression around your menstrual cycle. And
what's PMDD again?
Premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And so essentially it's like when you find yourself with a lot of just very intense mood swings around your menstrual cycle. And for me, like with a lot of the patterns that I have historically, I am one who would find myself often emotionally eating. And when I emotionally eat, it's almost always like 9.9 out of 10 times it's going to happen in the evening. Like I can feel very in control during the day, but I get to that point at the end of the day, I'm tired. It might even feel like, oh man, I got through the day. But for whatever reason, that's when I find myself just feeling like weak and feeling like, oh my gosh, I just want to stuff my face with all the things. And so recently, I was really in this, and we popped over to Whole Foods because, we have a Whole Foods by us now. Super exciting.
Oh, man. I love how for me, I'm 31 now, but at 31 years of age, I'm like, that's what I look forward. I'm like, oh, yes, there's a new grocery store that opened by my house. That's what,
that's what excites us on the weekends.
Yep.
So we popped over to Whole Foods, and if you've been to Whole Foods, and if you know, the chocolate chip brown butter chocolate chip cookies. Oh, they're amazing.
Just the way, even you saying the name, I'm like chocolate chip brown butter cookie. I'm like, sign me up. I'm in.
They're so good. And those are definitely my kryptonite for sure. I'm a chocolate person. I'm a cookie person, and I just like a good chocolate chip cookie. That is what I want to die experiencing. But anyway, so found myself just like staring at the box of chocolate chip cookies, and these just like beautiful brown butter chocolate chip cookies were just staring me in the face. Like we were just like making eye contact, me and those chocolate chip cookies. And I just felt like this thought came over me of like, I already feel like crap. Why don't I just make myself feel even worse on a physical side now? Because mentally I don't feel good. I don't want to feel good physically right now. And so like I consciously bought these cookies knowing that I was going to overeat those cookies that night. It was not going to be I'm going to, eat one cookie, feel satisfied from that, and then move on with my life like I would normally when I feel very intentional around, allowing myself to eat lots of treats. And that's what a healthy relationship with food looks like. This was more of that unhealthy relationship with food where I'm going into this already feeling guilt and shame, knowing how I'm going to feel after I eat, too many cookies. And so that's what led me to want to do this episode where, whether or not you find yourself emotionally eating, whether or not you find yourself eating at night, I think this episode's going to benefit a lot of people because I just want to specifically talk about how to manage the very mindless evening eating.
Can I add something to that too? In addition, of course, to the hormonal, the mood swings, some of the stuff that you described, I get on calls with people all the time and they're like, and normally my question, I was like, all right, so how can I help? Like, what is your biggest struggle, right? What is your biggest challenge when it comes to your health, when it comes to your fitness? And half the time it'll be like, well, it's food, or well, it's sweets, or well, it's cravings. And I really think, and correct me if I'm wrong, the problem's not the sweets or the cravings or the food. It's one, your relationship to it. And then two, like the reason why you're having these cravings or the reason why you're having some of these things, right? Because a lot of times I think you kind of nailed it, but you might be stressed, You might be just tired from the day, and we find like such comfort in food in the brown butter chocolate chip cookies. But the other part of it, and that I think is so important to mention, is the reason why a lot of people are having these severe cravings is because we're just not, one, eating enough, or two, eating the right things. And I know for myself, especially when I'm in between meetings, or, you know, when I've just had a crazy day and I haven't had the time to eat, I'll go in the fridge, and if there is a brownie or if there's something sweet over, you know, like a meal, I will go for that 99% of the time, because it's just so much more satisfying and rewarding.
Yeah, I mean, that makes total sense. Let's dive into this a little bit more, because I want to actually unpack, like, why do these patterns happen? So, like, you mentioned of like eating between, like, during the day and eating between like meetings and different things. But like, let's dive specifically into the evening eating, because I think that's what plagues people the most. Is a lot of people are perfectly fine, and I see this a lot, especially with women, especially with, like, you know, hardworking women, or, you know, women who are, you know, stay-at-home moms, like women who are just very, very busy during the day. We're typically pretty on point with our nutrition during the day, or maybe we're under eating, but either way, we're not finding ourselves typically like overeating during the day. It's typically at night when this happens. And so let's kind of dive into, like, how can you start to manage this pattern of evening eating if it feels out of control for you? Because I want to emphasize that as well. Eating in the evening itself is not a problem. We absolutely, you know, you're going to be eating at night, and I don't believe in a lot of the like rules around like, oh, you shouldn't eat past a certain point in time. It's very, very individual for different people. But if you find yourself just like on autopilot, eating the things that you wouldn't normally be eating and feeling kind of like out of control, feeling like you're just eating past the point of fullness where you don't feel good afterwards, you have a lot of shame around it, that's what we're talking about here. It's that mindless eating that's happening. So what can we do to start to manage it? So you kind of already started to allude to this a little bit. What we need to do first is identify the cause. What is actually causing you to just go down this pattern of mindlessly eating at nighttime? So this is super, super important for a lot of people. They might be like, you know, like, I'm going to skip over that one. Like, give me the next step. Like, that one's fine. Or maybe they'll just like think on it really briefly. But this is so, so important, because we're not going to resolve the issue if we don't know the root cause of the issue. Just like we talk about with hormone health, with gut health, we have to know the root cause to be able to solve it. It's the same thing with these behavior patterns around food. If we want to stop the mindless evening eating that doesn't make us feel so good, we have to know what's actually causing it.
You can't fix what is it? What you're not aware of?
Yep, exactly. So typically there are two main reasons that the mindless evening eating is happening. So there's like the biological side of it, the biology, and there's the psychological side of it. So biology-wise, I would encourage you to simply ask yourself, you know, have you nourished yourself well throughout the day? Have you been eating enough? Have you been eating, you know, sufficient calories, sufficient macronutrients? Were your meals balanced? Were you eating a good breakfast? For a lot of people, it's like they skip breakfast, and that's when they find themselves eating at night a little bit too often. Like, really just asking yourself of like, how well did you nourish your body throughout the day? Because biology is always going to trump willpower. And so you're going to find yourself consistently struggling with that willpower at night if your biology is off because you're not nourishing your body appropriately throughout the day.
I like that line. Biology is always going to trump willpower. I've never heard that one before.
Yeah.
That's very smart.
I'm a very smart person. But so that's like the biology side of it. So then we have the psychology side. So we need to make sure also that, you know, we're also considering like our thoughts, our emotions, you know, our relationship with food as a whole. And that's like a huge one that we could dive into. And we've talked about, you know, at certain points in various episodes in the past, but it's so, so important to consistently work on improving your relationship with food as a whole so that you don't find yourself feeling restricted and leading yourself to overeating at night because, you know, maybe you're somebody who you never would allow yourself to have the brown butter chocolate chip cookies, which I'm sure everybody after this episode is going to track those down and try and buy them now.
Like, let me go to Whole Foods now.
But maybe you're somebody you like never would allow yourself to have that. You're like, cookies are off limits. You know, I'm a healthy quote unquote person. I don't eat that stuff. Like, that is, you know, just not cool for you. Well, guess what? You're probably the same person who finds yourself feeling like you eat those things out of control. And like, there may be the reason you don't allow yourself to have it is because you don't believe that you can have it within a feeling of control. And that's not true. That's a limiting belief. You can absolutely have those things with a feeling of control. That's what we help our clients do each and every day.
What's funny is, not to go on too much of a tangent here, but even for me as a guy, because I think guys are like, no, like I got this, I don't need to do this. But the one thing that has really helped me improve some of these things is, like, for example, we went out to breakfast on Sunday and I had some pancakes and an egg white omelet and all that stuff. And as I was eating the pancakes, chocolate chip pancakes, by the way, amazing. But I was getting to a point where I probably ate 2 out of 3 and I was like, I could keep going, or I'm like, let me just sit here for a sec, like drink some coffee, just take a couple of minutes to chill for a sec. And then I'm like, all right, how do I want to like feel later in the day? I'm like, is it worth it? I'm like, do I really want this? Like, I'm already pretty full. And so I was at a point where I was like, you know what? I think I'm good. I feel good. And then, and not to say like, you can't eat it or whatever, but just taking that 30 seconds, a minute to just be like, all right, let me look around. Let me take a breather. How do I feel? How do I want to feel afterwards? That has helped me tremendously. I can't recommend that.
Yeah, that's a great way to tackle both the biology side of it and the psychology side, because you still had a balanced meal overall, like you didn't mention, but you had a nice balanced high protein meal of like an egg white omelet with veggies in it. So you had some fiber, you had some protein, and then you had your carbs and fats primarily coming from the pancakes, but you are allowing yourself to have it. So you're developing that healthy relationship with food where when you want those things, you allow yourself to indulge when it feels right for you. Of course, you're considering different factors. It's not always just like spontaneous eating, but you do allow yourself to have those things so it doesn't feel off limits. So when you find yourself then at that point of biologically you're feeling full, you're feeling satisfied because you've given your body enough of the nutrients it needs, you can listen to that feeling and say, okay, I'm satisfied. This is enough, because you don't feel like this is the last time you're ever going to allow yourself to have it. You trust that you will allow yourself to have that again if and when you want to have it again.
Yeah. One thing I've heard from a coach in the past, and I think he nailed it, but he's like, you're a grown man. He's like, you can go out and buy pancakes whenever you want, or you can go out and buy brownies whenever you want. He's like, so like there's no restriction to it. You can have it. It's just more so just learn how to incorporate that into your daily life.
Exactly. So that's number one, is really identifying the cause there. So, if you did, let's say you're listening to this episode last night, you just, mindlessly ate, maybe you're feeling a little bit, guilty about it. Like, that's okay. We're going to accept that guilt is there, but let's go ahead and just trace back. Let's look backwards and say, what was maybe the cause for you that led you to want to overeat? Was it emotional? Was it more on like the psychology side? Was it a feeling of restriction? Was it emotionally eating, like you're trying to like numb some emotions? Was it biological? Was it that you underate yesterday? Maybe you didn't have enough of certain nutrients, like really asking yourself those questions. Now, number 2, so this is more of like either if you're in the moment, wanting to like identify, you're about to kind of find yourself in that pattern of overeating, of just mindlessly eating at night, and you want to kind of put a pause on it. This is something you can do, or this is something you can put in your back pocket for the next time that this comes up. And so number 2 is to plate your food. This one sounds so simple, and a lot of people skip over it. I am guilty of often skipping this myself when it comes to nighttime, because I'm like, I don't want to dirty up another dish. But I really, really encourage you, especially if you are consistently struggling with a pattern of mindlessly eating at night, I really, really want you to take a pause and think about how often are you eating things like straight from the package, right in front of the refrigerator, right in front of the cabinets. Like, how often are you just like instantly eating it, versus are you taking those snacks out or those meals out that you are kind of overeating at night? And are you actually setting out like the serving that you want and putting it onto a plate and sitting down and eating it?
Here's another one for you. I think this is going to hit with a lot of the busy moms that listen to this, but as you're prepping lunches for your kids, how many times are you just having a couple pretzels? How many times are you having a couple bites of this, a couple bites of that? Or as you're prepping dinner, like, you're like, oh, I'm going to put some cheese. I'm like, oh, because I do this. I'm like, oh, if it's not, on the scale, I'm like, I'm good. I, have a couple bites. Next thing you know, that stuff starts to add up. Or the biggest one that I know you've mentioned in the past is holidays or birthday parties, right? Mm-hmm. When you just roam around the table with the cookies or the fruits or whatever, that stuff, I mean, it gets me every time.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's number 2. Let's plate our food. Choose your portion, put it on a plate, and sit down and eat it. Number 3, remove distractions. This one is
Why are you looking
huge.
At me?
I am not looking at you at all. I just happened to look in your direction.
I'm feeling personally attacked on these next ones, but whatever.
Well, remove distractions. So, like, if you are somebody who maybe you start to munch on your food with the, like, your phone
Instagram app
scrolling.
open.
Yeah, maybe you got Instagram open. Maybe you're scrolling at the same time as you're munching. Maybe you're watching TV at the same time. Like pairing the act of eating with another like distraction is going to absolutely lead you to overconsume, because you cannot at a basic level be fully focused on both things at once. And so what that means is, like, as you're scrolling through and you see that cool reel for the, 10, 15, 20 seconds that you're watching the reel, you're not thinking about the food that's in your mouth. You may have even, like, if you eat at the rate that Omar eats, you probably already shoveled another 2 spoonfuls of whatever it is into your mouth.
That was a bit of a ricochet shot at me there, Vanessa.
But it's the reality, though. If you're doing 2 things at once, you're more likely to overeat. So if you want to put a pause on this habit, it's not to say that you can never, eat while doing something else. But if you want to work on this because you want to start to reduce the frequency or the intensity that you are mindlessly eating at night, then I really, really encourage you, remove distractions when you find yourself eating at night. And so again, like, we're not even trying to eliminate the habit of eating at night. We just want to bring a little bit more intentionality to it. That's number 3. Let's remove distractions. So number 4, let's breathe deeply and calm emotions.
Ready? I feel so calm.
Wow, look at you. But the reality is a lot of mindless evening eating, like I kind of talked about. So there's the biology side of it. But there's also the psychology side of it. And I know for myself, when I find myself in that pattern of eating at night, it's rarely the biology side, because I'm pretty on top of my nutrition during the day. For me, it is 9.9 out of 10 times the psychology of it. And it's not a feeling of restriction, because I do have a very healthy relationship with food. For me, it's typically wanting to just like subconsciously buffer the emotions that I'm feeling. So what I mean by that is, like, if I'm feeling depressed, if I'm feeling frustrated, if I'm feeling worried, these different like emotions that are uncomfortable to be in, they're uncomfortable to sit in. How do we just buffer that feeling? We buffer it by something like food, and specifically foods that make us like feel really good in the moment that we're eating it, like that sugar, the fats, like the salts, like all these things that like hit our taste buds and you feel really, really good in the moment of eating it. That's lessening the intensity of those other emotions just for that moment. And so it's a trick, really, because you might feel good for like the minute that you're eating that food, but as soon as you get to the other side of it, you likely feel even worse, because now you're combining in like some guilt, some shame, some other emotions. Maybe you physically don't feel well, and so like you end up feeling worse for it anyway. But typically, that's what's happening when we're talking about emotional eating. So simply by taking a moment and identifying what it is that you're feeling, like getting clear on what you actually are feeling in your body, pull up the feelings wheel, go to feelingswheel.com, figure out like, what am I feeling in this moment? And then breathe into it. Take a few deep breaths. Again, this is nothing about this is saying that you can't still eat that food. What this is going to do is it's going to help you just get a little bit more present, get a little bit more conscious of what's happening in your body, and it's going to give you that little bit of extra edge of control to where you might find yourself then, eating one cookie, feeling satisfied, and then moving on, and then you don't feel as much of like the guilt and the shame and the physical discomfort that follows.
Yeah, that I'm telling you, that 30 seconds, the minute that you take to do that and like disrupt a pattern, that has been a game changer for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, then number 5 here, kind of already started to mention this a little bit here, but number 5 is to stay present. So a lot of the things we talked about already leading up to this are ultimately helping us get more present in that moment that we are eating the food. And so with adding that layer of just like really being present, really truly focusing on the food. So we talked about removing our distractions. We talked about, plating the food so you can really like sit down and focus on it. We talked about like calming our emotions. So that's going to help us be more present. So in general, with being present, something that you can do to like really anchor yourself into the moment of eating the food is ask yourself questions about it. What does it taste like? What is like the texture of this food in my mouth? Like every single bite, have one bite. If you're eating like with a fork or a spoon, set the fork and the spoon down and focus on the bite in your mouth, and not until you fully swallowed, then start to scoop up your other bite. That way you're focusing on what's in your mouth. You're not already starting to focus on the next bite itself. Like all these things. Why are you making that look?
Because I'm so bad at this one. This one's hard for me.
Yeah, it's hard for a lot of people. I get it. And that's why it's so important even for us. Like like I was saying, I still struggle with this stuff sometimes. And like, like most of our podcast episodes, a lot of what I am putting out, it's top of mind for me because it's something I'm actively working on. It's something that's like actively within my awareness. These are all things that I'm actively bringing back into my awareness because I'm like, oop, I feel like I'm starting to get back into that pattern of mindlessly eating at night.
Yeah. I know for me, like even like dinners, if I've had just a rough day, I literally will just like take the plate and just like scoop it into my mouth. I mean, that's just what I mean.
Yeah. I feel like it's like, what was it like in SpongeBob that Patrick is just like a vacuum mouth and just like, like that's actually Omar.
All of the Krabby Patties.
Yes. Yeah, that's a actual footage of Omar.
I'm telling you, we need to do that reel where like you try to keep up with me.
I would die.
I would love to see that.
I would actually choke and die. But yeah, so number 6, we're just staying really present. Or that was number 5. Gosh, I'm really bad with my numbers today.
You got to stay present.
I am struggling with that. Number 5, stay present. Last but not least, tip number 6, reflect on it. So this is one that's going to come more so again, coming after the act of it happening. And so I really would encourage you again, let's not skip this one. And this one can feel really uncomfortable. This one can feel really, really probably the hardest of all of them, because if we found ourselves mindlessly overeating, we probably just want to move on from it very quickly. We probably don't want to think about it any longer. We probably are just like, I just want to get away from that. I want to forget that happened. That's not serving you. What does serve you is to just accept that it happened, face any emotions you're feeling around it, but now sit down and maybe grab your phone and pull up your notes app and just go through some questions about it right now. These questions I would encourage you to ask was I hungry? So this one's really, really important because it's good for you to identify, okay, was this biological or was this psychological? If you were physically hungry, that's probably a sign that it was biological, and that you were probably under eating during the day or under eating certain types of foods, or just your body needed something. Number 2, did I eat consistently throughout the day? Again, this is going to help us identify, was this biological or was this psychological? And there can always be mixed in a little bit of both, but this really helps us get to the root cause of, what really caused this here. Did I, maybe skip some meals? Did I go for long periods of time without eating? Like, kind of helps you trace back what led up to this instance. Number 3, did I skip or fall short on any macros today? So oftentimes, like, I'll find that if I'm traveling and if I'm like on vacation, maybe I'm a little bit more like loose with my nutrition, I might accidentally undereat on protein. Then I may find myself in the evening overeating. And if I look back, I can typically always pinpoint of like, I underate my protein that day. I'm not feeling as satisfied, as not feeling as full, and just like my blood sugar is not as balanced, because the protein is really important for making sure blood sugar is balanced throughout the day. It's like, it makes sense why I overeat. I'm not just like this piece of crap who just can't control myself. It's just a biological level of like, I didn't eat enough protein today, so it makes sense. That alone, that realization can give me a lot of relief.
And I like the fact that you're taking the blame like from yourself and be like, it's not necessarily me, it's just the actions that I'm taking.
Exactly. Now, shifting a little bit more to like the psychological side of it, you can ask yourself, do I think this food is bad, quote unquote bad, or do I have an unhealthy relationship with it? So like going back to my example of the brown butter chocolate chip cookies, so good. In the past, I had an unhealthy relationship with cookies. There was a period of time early in my fitness journey where I was completely 100% cookies were off limits. And so if I found myself like feeling very weak, feeling restricted, because eventually I was going to get restricted if I'm not allowing myself to ever have those things, then what I would do is I would absolutely overeat them, because I would kind of have this mindset of like, this food is bad, I'm not allowed to have this, but you know what? I'm just going to allow myself to have it this one time and then never again. And guess what? If I'm only going to allow myself to have it this one time and never again, you can bet that I'm absolutely going to eat until I just feel horrible and disgusting, because I want to eat as much as I can. I almost want to like punish myself in the moment so that I might like have this mentality of, if I just eat as much as I can of this right now, I'm never going to want it again.
Yeah.
It never works. Don't try that. But that's number 4. Do I think this food is bad, or do I have an unhealthy relationship with it? Question number 5, was I present and actively engaged while eating? So kind of going back to our steps there a little bit, but it's helping you kind of reflect back and notice, like, was I distracted? Was I present? Was I like really thinking about my food? Or was I maybe just purely distracted, and maybe that's why I overate, was because I wasn't even noticing my fullness cues because I was just distracted. It comes down to that. Number 6, did eating this feel good? That one's a big one as well, because that's going to help you also kind of notice what is some of the psychological side of this. If you actively did not feel good while eating it, maybe you already felt shame and guilt around it. That's going to help uncover that, okay, we got some work to do in our relationship with food. Number 7, was it enjoyable both during and after? That's important. Food should not just be enjoyable while you're eating it. You should afterwards be able to like continue to feel good about the fact that you ate it. Continue to feel like, oh my gosh, that was so good. I'm going to keep thinking about that for a while because it was like, I feel really satisfied right now. Like you were talking about with your pancakes. After you like left that last pancake on the plate, you weren't already then suddenly being like, oh, I wish I hadn't eaten those. That was bad. I don't feel good. You're like, oh man, I feel really satisfied. Those were delicious. I'm so glad we came. Breakfast was awesome. Like you continue to talk about it throughout the day.
I'm like, man, those were some good pancakes.
Yeah.
I'll go back. Yeah.
Like that's an enjoyable memory for you. If you find yourself overeating at night and the memory of it itself brings up like unhappy emotions, that's a red flag. That's a sign that we have some things we got to work on. And then last question, this one's probably the most important one overall, and that is, what could I change next time? This one is huge. Listen back to this whole episode again, and that'll give you some ideas on what specifically you could change. You don't have to tackle every single tip we gave you here. You could focus on one thing that you feel like you could work on, and that right there could guide you towards a healthier relationship with food, towards ending this pattern of mindlessly overeating at night, and towards just feeling intentional and feeling in control with your food and with your eating. Anything you want to add?
No, I think this is all good. I think the biggest thing is just creating awareness for it and just taking a split second. Like you said, one of the things I really enjoyed of you mentioning was you're like, you know what? Stepping away from the emotions or punishing yourself, that's not going to serve you. That's not serving you, period. So let's understand it, figure out why they're showing up, figure out like the pattern, and find the thing that can break the cycle so that we can actually enjoy the foods because they're not going to go away, and then get to a point where you can actually, again, enjoy it, but without punishing yourself or without you just mindlessly doing it, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope too that, this gives you some relief in this episode, even to hear that like Omar and I still struggle with these things sometimes. I have been, coaching women online for almost 5 years now. And I have coached nearly 1,000 women within our program. I myself have been coached by, some of the top coaches across different domains in the world. I've spent, probably over, at this point, at least $150,000 on coaching within this industry. And I still, to this day, might fall back into these patterns here and there and struggle with this stuff.
Well, food is it's an everyday thing. It's not like, any other addiction where you're like, well, just don't drink or don't take this pill or whatever. Like you still have to eat every single day. So it's a constant journey, I would say.
Yeah. And we're all working on so many different things at once. Maybe you're a little bit more tuned into working on your gut health right now. And with that, you might kind of let your relationship with food, maybe like that bucket, or like maybe it's kind of like juggling balls. Maybe you kind of drop that ball a little bit, but that's okay because right now you're really focused on the gut health one. But now maybe you find yourself in this pattern of starting to kind of like mindlessly overeat, and it's just a sign you need to work on this a little bit more again, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with you. This is the work. This is what it is to work on your health and fitness, and it's going to be something that you work on for the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. I hope you got some value out of it. If you did, do me a favor, leave a rating and review on our podcast. Help spread the word.
5 stars, no big deal.
Yeah. If you feel like we deserve 5 stars, give us a 5-star rating, or just give us a rating and review for whatever you think we deserve. But we really appreciate your support. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next week.
Bye, you guys.